Hey everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of If I Knew Then Mom Edition. I'm your host, Maria, and I'm so excited you're here. This podcast is going to be all about real motherhood stories, those unfiltered, powerful lessons we wish somebody would have told us before we became moms. Whether it's about healing, identity, or even those tiny humans that teach us more about ourselves than we would have ever imagined. This space is for it all. So today, I actually wanted to introduce myself. Like I said, my name is Maria. I am a pediatric sleep consultant. And today, I actually wanted to talk about something that right now is actually going on with me personally. And so it all started with my first pregnancy. I lost that baby when I was roughly 6 weeks of pregnancy and hit really bad depression. And so I didn't know that you could actually have postpartum depression without actually giving birth to a baby. And I guess, at the end of the day, nobody told me that this was even a possibility. And so I still remember going into the doctor's office, and just that time alone was COVID. That was very stressful. We were all very excited the fact that I was pregnant, and I had to go to all the doctor's appointments by myself. So I had to look for 3 different OPs, and most of them were like, oh, the doctor can't see you until you're like roughly 13 to 15 weeks. And that I couldn't hold off that long. I really wanted to see the baby. I wanted to, be able to get answers to all the questions that I had. And so I was able to get an appointment with a doctor. I still remember the day that I just walked into his office, and I had a little book with my questions on it. And for me, I think it's very reasonable, especially being a first-time mom, having the questions that you wish to get answered. And one of those questions that I had was, how would I know if I am having a miscarriage? Just out of curiosity. And I remember this doctor looking at me, and he said the following: don't think about it like that. Don't overthink it. Right now, everything seems perfectly fine. You're healthy, and the ultrasound, everything seems fine. And that was roughly than me, maybe on a Tuesday and probably Monday, Tuesday. And roughly around Wednesday night, I was feeling kind of weird. And I was telling my husband, I was like, listen, like, I don't know what's going on, but something's up. So then the next morning, I had a little bit of bleeding. Okay. I called the doctor. They told me that tends to be normal in the first few weeks of pregnancy. Just try to take it easy. And so on that Friday, I started having really bad cramp, and I didn't know what was going on. So I call again. They told me to just lie down, take it easy, and that they will see me on the following week. And so by 5 o'clock, I was already like in excruciating pain. My parents came to come and visit me. They came and gave me tea and whatever. And since it was COVID, they didn't want to be with me too long because, COVID times. And yeah, as soon as they left, I went to my apartment. And at that moment, I started feeling in more pain and more pain. And I was just like folding myself in half because I just couldn't bear with the pain. And at that moment, a friend of mine, she went through 2 losses. And I texted her, I'm like, hey, this is what's going on. I don't know what to do. So she told me, just go to the bathroom, sit there, and it's most like it sounds like you're having a miscarriage. So at that moment, like, I guess the pain was so bad that I wasn't even thinking about anything else. I just went with just pure desperation and just sat down in the bathroom, and my body did what it needed to do. And as soon as that process finished, my body just felt relieved. Physically, the pain was just completely gone. There was no more pain. There was no more pressure. It was just a moment that my body felt finally kind of like relieved. But emotionally, feeling that relief, I felt so guilty and I felt so bad. I didn't know, what even happened. I was in my bathroom by myself. I just didn't know. And yeah, obviously I looked, and it was a gruesome picture and flushed. And so that day, my husband came from work, and I told him what happened. And, I called the doctor. It was after hours, and they just try to take it easy, this and this and that, and just come in the next week, first thing in the morning, Monday. So that's exactly what happened. And then they confirmed that I did have a miscarriage, and, thankfully, my body did what I needed to do, and they didn't have to do any procedures after that to clean me out or anything. And so with that alone was very challenging to digest, especially having to do it like by myself. Couldn't have visitors, couldn't have anybody because we were all, during the pandemic. And so maybe a few months after that, we were very blessed to get pregnant again. And at that moment, I still was going through a lot of emotions, and I didn't allow myself to feel happy. I didn't allow myself to enjoy the pregnancy because of the fear of losing this baby. So as the pregnancy went on, I had a lot of vivid dreams. And apparently those dreams, especially if they're like scary dreams, they tend to be because it's just survival. You're just on survival mode at that moment and you're just afraid. I guess your fears start coming up in your dreams. And once it was time for me to get the glucose exam, went in, did the whole glucose, the sugar exam, and yeah, left. Then they called me. And then they informed me that I had gestational diabetes. So I was extremely angry. I was extremely angry with my body. I was extremely angry with myself. I didn't understand why this was happening. Why did I have gestational diabetes? My weight was still in the health, like I was still, saying that I gained weight. Yes, of course, like most women, not all, but most women do gain weight during their pregnancy. I was very angry because I was like, I'm eating healthy. I'm trying my best to do what I need to do to keep myself healthy, to keep the baby healthy. Why is this happening to me? And so the day that I had to go see the specialist, because once you get diagnosed with gestational diabetes, you usually tend to get referred by a specialist. That first day that I walked into that office, once again, I had to go walk in and do everything, by myself. And once I walked in, they started doing the ultrasound to see how the baby is and to give me the information about how to control the insulin and the sugar levels and how, gestational diabetes can affect me and the baby and the birth and so on and so forth. And as they were doing the ultrasound, she stopped, she walked out, and then she walked back in. She came in, did another ultrasound, looked very slowly, kept going back and forth. And at that moment, I knew there was something going on. Didn't know what, but something was up. And so then the doctor came in and he was like, listen, we're seeing that the baby has VSD, which is little holes in the heart, right? So at that moment, I'm like, okay, so I'm here because I have this gestational diabetes, and now you're telling me there's something going on with my baby's heart. What does that mean? What's going on? And so he was like, we're going to refer you so that way you can see a pediatric cardiologist, so that way she can explain to you, what's going on and just check on the baby. So that same day, they give me a huge packet of information of what you can and cannot eat. You need to have a very strict schedule. You need to basically jot down everything that you do eat, how much you eat, and you need to be checking your sugars throughout the whole day. And walking out of the office, my husband picked me up and I just started crying. And I was just crying because of frustration, because of fear, because I didn't know what was going on. I was just trying to digest everything that was going on at that moment. I still remember my husband looked at me and he was like, it's okay. You're still going to be able to eat your cookies afterwards. Like after the pregnancy, you're going to be able to have your chocolate, your chocolate ice cream again, and you're going to be able to have your cookies. And I look at him and I know that he was trying to make me feel better, but I looked at him and I was like, what are you talking about? This is not the reason why I'm crying. And so then I told him about the baby and, and the frustration that I had. As the pregnancy went on, I was lucky enough to be able to see the baby. I guess that was one of the perks of having gestational diabetes, that I was able to see the baby extremely frequently. Another thing during that pregnancy, my placenta was actually on top of the belly. Usually it's either on the bottom, like internally, and mine was more externally. So I was not able to actually feel her move. If she will have hiccups on the hand, I can feel her. But besides that, it was very, very rare that I can actually feel the baby move. So I would always constantly be freaked out because I just couldn't feel her. But thankfully with those ultrasounds and so frequently, I was able to have my emotional self was able to relax and see the baby move and grow and things like that. And so they told that, one of the things with gestational diabetes, they tell you that they don't want you to pass the 40 weeks because then it can be dangerous. And the reason why they're constantly having to check you out so frequently is because they need to see that how big the baby's growing, because usually when you have gestational diabetes, babies tend to grow bigger and it could be dangerous for the baby, it can be dangerous for you. And so, but that's about it. That's about the amount of information that they actually give you. They don't give you information about what happens afterwards. They tell you that in most cases, most women, once they give birth, they are no longer pre-diabetic and the diabetes goes away. So the day that I gave birth, they had to induce me. And, I was there for 12 hours. And then suddenly the nurse and the OB will come in and go out once again. And, I was looking at my husband and I was like, something's going on because they keep going in and moving the monitor left and right. And suddenly the OB comes in to break my water. According to my husband, because I couldn't see, he was like, yeah, she used 3 different tools, but nothing happened. And I did have an epidural. I did decide to have an epidural. And when I got the epidural, they told me that there is a possibility that the epidural might not even work, or that it might work, but not to its full of potential. And so I was one of those that did not, like, the epidural did not work for me. It's 100%. So I was able to just feel my contractions. I was still able to feel most things. The doctor comes back in and she tells me, okay, mom, okay, dad, we have to do an emergency C-section. Baby's heart keeps stopping every single time you have a contraction. So just to make sure that the baby's safe and stays safe, we need to take out the baby now. And as she's telling us this, almost 20 people were already in the room, everything getting ready to go. And so, put me in the next bed. We were already starting to go to the surgery room. And then I keep telling the new nurse, hey, like, I can still feel everything. I can still feel everything. What are we doing? And when we got to the surgery room, I was like, okay, where's my husband? And they were asking, did you get the epidural? How much epidural did you get? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, at that point, I was just really freaked out. And then I told them, hey, I'm getting very nauseous. I ended up throwing up. COVID times, you had to always have a ridiculous mask. And I threw up with my mask. And yes, sorry, that's gruesome, but it was just, they just don't believe you, and it's crazy because if you're telling them, they were just like, it's okay, you're just stressed out. And they didn't believe me. And I threw up twice and they had to clean me up twice before the surgery. Until finally my nurse came in and she was like, stop putting a mask on her. Just let her be. And so my husband was waiting outside the surgery room, waiting to see if they were going to actually put me general anesthesia or not, because I was still able to feel. The doctor, asked me, hey, can you feel this? And I was like, yes, you're pinching me. She's like, okay, can you feel this? I'm like, yes, you cut me. So she was like, did you feel any pain? I was like, no. She's like, okay, let's go. So that's when they allowed my husband to come in. They did not tell him to sit down. So he was able to watch the whole surgery. But as he is coming in, the only thing he sees is me opened up, because by that point, they already started doing the surgery. And so he sees me and he sees me super pale. He's just worried. And I'm looking at him and I can't say anything because of just everything that's going on at the moment. And I hear the baby cry. And I start crying. And I look at my husband, and the only thing am able to say is go with the baby. Here's the thing. We didn't know whether it was going to be a boy or girl. And my husband looks at me and he was like, it's a girl. So I was like, go with her. And he, he was able to go. He went with the baby. And I stayed there. They, closed me up and whatever. Once the baby was born, the cardiologist saw her and her sugars were actually low. And so they had to feed her automatically with formula. And so one of the expectations that I had was, giving vaginal birth and then being able to breastfeed. And I'm pretty sure that's the expectation for most mothers, or that's what they would like for their experience to be, right? And so that was definitely not my experience. Automatically, once the baby was born, they started feeding her, and because her blood sugars were pretty low. And then after that, they checked her heart. And I was able to be in the recovery room. They brought the baby. I was able to see her. And then we went to the regular room. In less than 24 hours that our baby was born, they had to take her to the NICU. We were very blessed the fact that she was okay. The only thing is that she has phagocytosis and she had jaundice. So she had to have a lot of lights on her. And this phagocytosis is basically, instead of the blood cells being ovals, it's more of, instead of it being looking like a donut, it is actually like an actual sphere, like an actual ball. And so the body itself is like trying to understand why, and it's attacking its own blood cells and things like that. And I didn't know what was going on with the baby. I had to be in my room, and my husband was the one that was with the baby. And he was just so overwhelmed and so exhausted that when he came back to tell me what the doctor said, he couldn't explain to me, right? He was telling me that a blood cancer doctor came in and saw the baby. And so I just started freaking out because no pediatric doctor came in to tell me what was going on, to give me any type of updates. So I was just relying on my husband, on my very exhausted husband, to come and tell me. I started obviously, freaking out because I didn't know what's going on. So I told him, just go stay with the baby. I'm fine. Probably a couple minutes later, one of the OBs came in, and the first thing she asked me, she's like, "Hey, how are you doing?" And I just started crying, and I was like, "I'm not okay. Like, I don't know what's going on with the baby. Nobody has given me the update. This is what's going on. This is what my husband told me. I don't know what's going on. I'm scared." And so finally, after I had a huge breakdown, that is when they finally had somebody from the NICU and a doctor to come in to inform me what was going on with the baby. And so, long story short, the baby ended up having VSD and ASD, meaning little holes in different parts of the heart. And we were able to take the baby home after 7 days of her being in the NICU and having her levels being able to regulate. And we were able to take her home. And then once we were home, I was able to start breastfeeding her. I was not able to produce more than 2 ounces. Finally, I was able to get it up to 3. And I was breastfeeding her one night, put her down to sleep. And suddenly we hear a very strange noise coming from the room, and she was choking. And we didn't understand how she can be choking because there was nothing in the crib. She was just by herself, so we didn't understand what was going on. So my husband started trying to, started doing CPR as I called 911. And ambulance came. Once the ambulance was here, like once the ambulance came, the baby was okay and she was already sleeping. And so that paramedic, one of the paramedics was like, we explained everything, and he was like, "Oh, it sounds like she could be choking on her own reflux. Is she allergic to dairy or something?" Because she was like, and I told them no, that this was the first time. But it was very scary because she turned purple and she was like curving her back because of how much pain she was in. And then when I was calling to see when I could actually do the appointment with the gastro, they were telling me that I was going to take almost 30 to 60 days for us to be able to get an appointment with any specialist. And so the baby was very fuzzy. She was crying so much. She was always covering her back. Mind you, we were always burping her. I was already on a very strict diet because of the gestational diabetes, and I was making sure that I was still eating healthy because after giving birth, you really want to make sure that you are continuously eating healthy to be able to give the nutrients to the baby if you're breastfeeding, and just being able to recover. So after that, finally, the baby once again started choking, and we just decided to take her to the ER. And they left, we had to spend the night. And what happened was that, yeah, she was choking on her reflux. So basically everything that she will eat, it will go up. But instead of like most babies that have reflux, they tend to actually have a lot of spit out or just throw it all up. My baby wouldn't. My baby, now that she's 4, she still doesn't throw up. And just that experience alone, not knowing whether if you're going to go to sleep and not knowing if your baby's going to be choking while you're sleeping is very terrifying. And so while working with the gastro, they gave me another very strict diet. No dairy, no soy, no peanuts, and no gluten. So I live in the United States, and for you to find food with none of those things is extremely hard. So I started doing that diet, still trying to breastfeed, still happening. She started having blood in her stools, and that usually tends to be because of allergies. So I was losing it because there was so much pressure about breastfeeding and that breast is best and that you need to, do the best that you can for your baby and do not give up with breastfeeding. And I was feeling devastated. I was feeling very guilty, and I was feeling very bad. Like I was failing my baby until I was very blessed by having, I had to switch pediatrician because of insurance purposes. And that pediatrician looked at me and he told me the following: fed is best. And if we are just doing formula, we will be able to eat more easily pinpoint what is causing the allergy. And if not, we can actually just know that it's just the formula and just switch the formula. So at that point, though it was an extremely hard decision, I decided to stop breastfeeding because at that point I was able to produce 3 ounces if lucky. And because of the whole emergency situation, my production actually went down to almost maybe an ounce to an ounce and a half. And the baby was already almost 3 months at that moment, and she needed a lot more to be able to be a happy fed baby, right? And so I just decided to stop breastfeeding at that moment. And we started a very hypoallergenic formula that, yes, very expensive, but it was worth it because she was happier. She was a happier baby. The episodes of her choking was much less. And the thing was that they will tell you that if you do have a baby that has these allergies or has a lot of reflux or very colicky, they try to tell you to always, once they're fed, you hold them and you hold them up for at least 30 to 40 minutes before you put them down to sleep. And so on that note, my little one actually started getting used to falling asleep in our arms. And once finally she started eating solid foods, that helped a lot with the reflux. So she was actually not having those episodes anymore, but she was not sleeping. She would wake up so many times during the night. And it was mostly because she was very dependent on us carrying her. So I was, my husband and I, we were very exhausted. We were very sleep deprived, and I was seeing blurry at a certain point. And each time that she wouldn't sleep, I started getting angry, and my depression was getting worse. My anxiety was getting worse. And then I started feeling and started experiencing postpartum rage. And that is when, once again, I talked to the pediatrician, and then when he recommended for me to look for a sleep consultant 6 months after. And I started doing my research and found somebody, and she changed our lives. The baby, after 3 nights, the baby actually started sleeping through the night with only one feed, and I was starting to feel better. My postpartum journey started becoming brighter, better. With the life coach, with working with the sleep consultant, with working with a therapist, I started feeling more like myself. I started feeling more human. I started feeling more patient, and I just started enjoying more motherhood, and I saw the difference. And so I have a master's in education. I have worked with families and kids for 15 years, and that has always been my calling, to be able to help others and to work with kids and families. And so I started looking up on how, what are the requirements to become a life coach and a sleep consultant. I joined incredible institutions to get my certification. I got my certification, and I started Mindful Mother. I saw and I see with my clients the incredible transformations that can happen when you look for support. And now with Mindful Mother, I am able to do the same that Alice did for me, which is be able to actually sleep and rest. And now I'm able to do what my life coach did for me, which is give me tools for me to be able to actually enjoy motherhood. And so I created Mindful Mother. I created Mindful Mom Method, which is a 12-week program that includes sleep training, sleep support, and emotional and mental support for the moms, and just the overall household. As this went on, I got pregnant for the second time, and I was very anxious because I didn't know whether I was going to get gestational diabetes, because once you have gestational diabetes, it is very likely for you to get gestational diabetes the second time around. And when I did the glucose exam, I was like, oh my God, this is going to be horrible. So I did the glucose, and when they called me to give me the results, it told me that my iron was low, and that was probably one of the reasons why I was so exhausted most of the time. They told me that my sugar levels were normal, and I had her repeat maybe 4 or 5 times that my glucose levels were normal. And that was crazy. I was so excited. I was so happy that I didn't have to go through that again. I didn't know what they don't tell you, or at least I didn't get fortunate enough for anybody to really tell me much information about gestational diabetes. During both pregnancies, I started sweating a lot more. My libido went down. I started growing unwanted hair, especially on the face. My menstrual cycle with my second pregnancy has been completely out of whack. And so a lot of symptoms are coming up, and I didn't understand why. Went to the OB, did, a bunch of blood tests. Everything's fine. They tell me everything's normal. They did an ultrasound. Your ovaries seem fine. And usually they tell me whether it's probably stress. It's probably the depression. It's probably because you gain weight, which, by the way, my weight is actually lower than before I got pregnant with both of my babies. And so I decided not to be okay with those answers, because I don't feel like myself. I don't feel physically confident most of the time, because I'm so self-conscious about the unwanted hair, because I did laser hair removal and everything came back. So for those women that are listening, if you did, laser hair removals, there is always a chance that it will grow back because of the hormones, the hormonal change. And so as I am continuously doing research, it turns out that you can actually develop PCOS after pregnancies, or it could have been an undiagnosed PCOS. And now after pregnancies, it can actually start showing. And because of the gestational diabetes, it can actually also activate for you to help be informing you guys later on if I do have PCOS or not, because of insulin because of the insulin, because I could be going through PCOS and insulin resistance, which is causing me to be exhausted all day. I'm getting random headaches. I'm getting migraines. Like I said, unwanted hair on my head is actually falling, and just low libido, just a bunch of other more or symptoms that are happening that, I saw a headache specialist, and then I mentioned it to her. I'm like, hey, could the fact that I had gestational diabetes, could that be affecting my headaches? So then she referred me to a sleep specialist, which I saw yesterday. And then he informed me that PCOS can actually cause sleep issues and fatigue, really bad fatigue. And so now next week, I'm going to be actually seeing a hormonal specialist because I refuse to accept the typical diagnosis of everything's fine, everything is normal, or it could be premenopausal. And I'm like, okay, I'm only 33, but there's so many other things that are just, there's something in me, there's a gut feeling in me that tells me to not let it go, because I want to be able to see what is a life change that I need to make for me to be feeling like me again. And so for anybody that's listening, if I knew that moment, I would become more of an advocate for my own self. I would be like, always listen to your gut feeling. And especially when it comes to yourself, and especially when it comes to your kids, your kids best. And I have another story for another day. And I hope that my story is able to help anybody that's listening today. If you have a feeling, or if you're not feeling well, or if there's something going on, I want you to know, first of all, that you're not alone. And second of all, look for that support. And even if you are hesitant because of financials, there's a lot of programs out there that are either free or low cost, or will work with you to be able to get the help that you deserve and the one that you need. We moms need support. It takes a village to raise a child, but in reality, it takes a village to be able to help the mom to be able to raise the child. So I wanted to be here, tell my story, and hopefully help other moms that have gone through similar situations to know that they're not alone. And if you are having any of these symptoms or have gone through similar things, I want you to know that I'm here for you. And I want to thank all of you guys for supporting this podcast. This podcast is with the mission and the goals to be able to help not only moms, but any parent out there. This podcast is to be able to help families be able to become healthier, more mindful, and just to be able to have a safe space where you hear stories that will help you become a better you, that will help knowing if there is something going on, who to talk to, where to go, or even if you don't, you can contact my guest or you can contact me, and we'll be more than happy to help you, guide you to where the next step of your journey needs to be. So on that note, once again, thank you so much. And if this resonates with you, I would love for you to go ahead, like, follow, and share this podcast with a fellow mom. And if you have any stories to share, a lesson, a laugh, or a moment that changed everything, send me a message and I would love to have you on my guest on my next episode. Thank you again. And I hope you have a beautiful and wonderful day.